And welcome back to Theater Talk Boston. Today we're so pleased to be joined by Max Vernon, who wrote the music, lyrics, and book for The View Upstairs, currently playing over at SpeakEasy Stage Company. Hi Max, thanks for coming in today.
Hi.
So for our listeners who are unfamiliar with your show, can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, the show is inspired by an arson attack that happened in 1973 at a gay bar in New Orleans called the Upstairs Lounge that burned down and 32 people died, which sounds like a horrible idea for a musical. I was trying to explain this yesterday to people in this talkback we did at SpeakEasy, that if you think about it, like Chicago is a musical about a bunch of amoral murderers. Cabaret and Sound of Music are both musicals about Nazis, right? So It's possible to write about dark material, but find a different way in. And for me, as an artist and activist, I knew that I wanted to shed light on this kind of forgotten history, but I think the way to really feel loss is to fall in love with something. And so the show is mainly a celebration of this community. It is really not a funeral. It's not a eulogy. But for me, because I was not alive in 1973, and I like to try to approach things from a place of authenticity and honesty, I added this kind of magical time travel device to the show so that the history of this bar could be contextualized in a millennial's experience of someone who's grown up in this era of quote-unquote progress, but actually who has no sense of his history or community, who is buys this dilapidated building in New Orleans because he's going to tear it down, and he wants to build his fashion flagship because he's a clothing designer. And instead, he's thrown back into the past on the day of the fire and falls in love with this community, and then has all these kind of cultural clash moments. And then at the moment of the fire, he's thrown back into the present and then has to try to make sense of that experience and figure out how he's going to change his life to honor the people that he met in the past.
Right. And I know you mentioned, I read that not many people know about this fire, and you found out about it through your work when you were down at NYU. How did you come across this tragedy?
It was kind of like one of those internet black holes where you start at like midnight reading about David Bowie on Wikipedia, and then 2 hours later you've got 30 tabs open, and one of them is about like the antioxidant content of broccoli. But I ended up in a random chat board, and I think I saw a post that said something to the effect of, next month is the 36th anniversary of the Upstairs Lounge fire where 32 people died. And even before fake news was a buzzword, I thought it was fake news because I had never heard of it, and I was an undergrad major in gender and sexuality studies, so I thought I knew pretty much everything there was to know about queer history because I had, read at that point like 100 books on it, and I was writing these like super erudite 30-page papers on cyborg feminism and all this stuff, and a lot of the professors at NYU are some of like the leading lights in the field of gender and sexuality studies, and I brought this to their attention, and most of them had never even heard of it either. So I was like, that's really bizarre. Why is it that no one in our community knows about this history? So I kind of flagged it, put a pin in it in the back of my brain of like, that would be interesting to find a way to honor that in some day. And then when I went back to school for the very equally financially savvy degree of musical theater writing for my thesis piece, I decided to find a way to write about it.
Amazing. You wrote an incredible cast of characters who frequent this bar. How were you inspired, or what inspired you to write all of these characters?
Yes, well, I did a fair amount of research, or of what limited research I could do, because when I started writing the show 7 years ago, there was almost no information out there at all. Now I think there's a few different books, there's a documentary, but the limited research I could do was from doing at the library microfiche of like the Times-Picayune and seeing names of the people and doing deep Googles of them. But I ultimately decided kind of along the lines of that authenticity thing. Like, I was not alive in 1973. If a tragedy befell my life and then 40 years later some random kid was writing about people I knew, using their names, putting words in their mouth, I would be offended. So for me, I wanted to do the research, know who these people were, honor them, but also create my own characters that were kind of hybrid amalgamations of these people, so that I protected their privacy in the same way. But yeah, I mean, there was a mother who was there with her son at the bar on the night of the fire who passed away. There was a piano player. There were drag performers at the upstairs lounge. So many of these archetypes that are in the show are, if you actually knew the history of the upstairs lounge, you might be able to put the name to the character.
Sure. What do you hope audiences take away when they see your production?
So the opening song that also kind of comes back during the finale is called Some Kind of Paradise. Yes. And that is very intentional. It's not just called Paradise. Mm-hmm. And that is because I don't think there is any utopian time to be alive. And I think it's always really easy to look back on the past and think, oh, it was so much better back then. The music was better. The culture was better. But I think things are always, effed up and great and in progress.
Right.
You know what I mean? And 1973 is very similar in many ways to 2019. I mean, you had a corrupt president, Nixon, who was in the process of being impeached and then ultimately resigning because he was trying to use his Department of Justice to obstruct justice. Right now we're worried that Roe v. Wade could be struck down. 1973 was the year that Roe v. Wade was passed.
Right.
And it was also the year that homosexuality was removed from the list of mental disorders from the American Psychiatry Association, but it was also the year that you had this firebombing at the upstairs lounge in which 32 people died. And similarly now, it's like, yay, we have all this progress, we can get married, except our president is trying to ban trans people from homeless shelters and in the military, and we have Betsy DeVos who's, stripping back all these protections for LGBT students. So it's like both a time in which we're taking a huge step forward and there's a major cultural backlash to that. And so I'm trying to contrast these two different eras of queer life to say there's no perfect time to be alive. There is no utopia. All we have is our own goals of self-actualizing the spaces we want to see in the world. And like when beauty is taken out of the world, we need to put beauty back into the world. And we need to learn from the past, grab the torch, and keep marching forward because there will always be these forces that want to push us back.
For sure. Did you always know you wanted to write for musical theater?
No, I mean, musical theater was weirdly my first passion. Mm-hmm. I think, and neither of my parents are in theater. Neither of them are musical. In fact, if they started singing, you'd pay them to stop. But since the age of being 5, I was telling my mom, we need to get me an agent. I need to audition to be Cosette in Les Miserables. Amazing. So maybe I was a failed actor or something in a past life. Who knows? But yeah, musical theater was my first passion. Every night when I would go to sleep, I would listen to cast albums so that I could wake up having incepted myself and just wake up with all the lyrics memorized to all the songs because I wanted to get off book as quickly as possible. And I think, because young kids have such a plasticity to their brain when they're that age, I feel like all these cast albums kind of burn themselves into my brain, and that became like a second language that I memorized. And so I grew up loving musicals, loving the magic of waiting in the TKTS line and seeing, all the shows pop up on the board. Of course, now as a creator, I desperately do not want my shows on the TKTS board because that means you're not selling well and you need to discount. But yeah, so I grew up loving that. And then as I got older, I became very bullied, extremely bullied. I think, between the ages of, 10 and 17, I was probably called a faggot anywhere from 3 to 15 times a day. And so I kind of made a radical departure with my previous identity, and I associated my love of theater with a lot of the bullying. So instead, I threw myself into sex, drugs, and rock and roll and weird 60s performance art and punk and all that stuff and fashion. And so the last decade of my life has really been about trying to come to terms with the fact that I do still love theater,
right?
But to figure out how to stitch these two disparate parts of myself back together and to create musical theater that would appeal to the weirdos out there who have no interest in musical theater, and the punks and the sweaty kids dancing at, rock shows in Brooklyn and all that.
Sure. I think I would be remiss to not mention during Tony's week that your production of the show Off-Broadway starred Jeremy Pope as Wes, who's nominated for 2 Tonys this upcoming Sunday, one for Ain't Too Proud and one for The Choir Boy, which is coming to SpeakEasy next season. Do you have any Tony predictions?
Do I have any Tony predictions? I don't know.
Or have you seen anything this season that you loved?
Only insofar as, like, I'm sure the most milquetoast boring shows will win. I mean, there's so many awesome people nominated.
Yeah.
And I hope some of the great people who deserve to take home the trophies do. But, you know, I get a little bit. I've been through the award show circuit now, and I know how this stuff works, and the politics and the capitalist considerations that go into who get these trophies. But yeah, I mean, the supporting or featured, is it featured actress category this year is crazy. It's like Ali Stroker, Mary Testa, Amber Gray. I don't even know
Lily Cooper.
Sarah
Stiles.
I've worked with all those people, and I don't know who you would give it to. They're all amazing.
Yeah.
I hope Jeremy Pope takes home a trophy. He's a star, but you know, either way, he has many Tony Award nominations and actually, you know, awards that he will win coming in his future.
For sure.
I would be interested. I feel like Hadestown should win score, but it's interesting. Apparently, a lot of the talk is around The Prom and Tootsie, which I have not seen.
I loved both of them, but all three shows, very deserving. Now, besides for Boston, The View Upstairs has many productions going on very soon, from Utah to California over to the Soho Theatre in London. What's it like seeing so many different productions of your show and their take on it? And do you notice audiences responding differently in different cities?
Yeah, it's really beautiful and kind of inspiring and humbling in a way. I mean, I didn't think the show would even have one production, and I actually gave up on it having a production, you know, because theater is really hard. It's like no one wants to produce you until you've already been produced.
Right.
And I started writing the show when I was 23, and theater is expensive. You know, I mean, our original off-Broadway production of the show cost over $1 million, and so in terms of finding producers and investors, I got a lot of feedback where it's like, we love your show. We think you're so talented, but like we can't sell your show in your name because no one knows who you are.
Sure.
So like we need to bring some like elder statesman gay of the theater to come in and rewrite everything you've written. Just basically, or to not rewrite anything, but just slap their name on it and take half your royalties, you know, of like Moises Kaufman or Terrence McNally. And like those are all really wonderful people, but I knew that this was a story that felt really personal to me, and that didn't feel like the right creative path forward. So I kind of put my foot down, and I was just like, that's not happening, and either you'll produce it or you won't. And so most people were like, we won't. And so I kind of just gave up on the idea that it would ever get produced.
Yeah.
And then it did finally find a path forward and have this magical production. And then, you know, 2 years later, it's been licensed for 16 productions, and it's had quite a few of these. You know, we've played in everywhere from, as you said, it's coming up in this next month in San Francisco, Ohio, Texas, Utah, here in Boston, London, New Jersey, but it's also been in Australia, Virginia, Atlanta.
Awesome.
So it's going to be in Michigan. It's going around and having this kind of crazy life. And for me, the thing that's so beautiful about it is it's almost like the show is turning the Upstairs Lounge into Brigadoon. It's like for a month at a time, there's this magical, you know, queer bar popping up. And what I love is that there are some fixtures of the show. Like there always is the red flocked wallpaper that was the actual wallpaper of the Upstairs Lounge. There is the nude Burt Reynolds cardboard cutout that they had.
Right.
But the show provides an opportunity for every community to imagine what that ideal queer space is for them. And so that is really cool, seeing a bunch of these different productions and seeing how people reinterpret that. And yeah, along the lines of what you're talking about with audiences, it's really funny. Like when the show played in Chicago, all of the kind of like quippy, cynical New York lines that got the biggest laughs got no laughs. And then all of the throwaway lines that I thought were cheesy that I was like wanted to cut from the show got the biggest laugh lines. So it, you know, it's like things play differently in different places for sure.
One of my favorite parts of the show is the immersive experience of it. And in this Boston production here at SpeakEasy, like there are audience members sitting like right in the bar with the actors. What is so important, and why did you choose to have it be so immersive?
I mean, different productions are, I mean, I say in the author's note of the show, I'm like, I think it's better if you can do it immersively, but you can make it work as a proscenium show, and I've seen versions of the show that are proscenium. So it doesn't have to necessarily be immersive, but I think the cool thing about if you do an immersive staging of the show and you have some cabaret tables is that then the people who are sitting at the tables feel like they are also patrons in 1973, and along the lines of, you know, what I was talking about before of making people feel the loss of of the destruction of this space, it's easier to fall in love with the community if you yourself feel that you are a part of that community.
Right.
And like that is the ultimate icebreaker of being cast in the show in a way. I mean, no one in this show, no one is put on the spot and forced to, you know, speak or do anything awful like that.
Right.
But just by virtue of being in the space and being surrounded by all this wonderful gay kitsch, I think you feel like this is what it was like to be here in 1973.
Right. You have a lot of other exciting works. I know you just finished a reading of your show, The Tattooed Lady, with some huge Broadway legends, including Annie Golden and Lauren Patton, and we're all waiting to hear what happens next with K-pop. But what else are you up to?
Yeah, so K-pop, we're bringing it back to New York, or we're trying very hard to do that, and I can say nothing about that except for the fact that we have a workshop in 2 weeks. So exciting things are on the way for that, hopefully. But yeah, The Tattooed Lady, I'm really excited about. I'm writing this musical that is about tattooed women in the late 1800s in the Victorian era freak show, and it has an ensemble of all female identified performers of every different race, size, shape, age, kind of singing about 100 years of history and figuring out how to Lion King the hell out of those tattoos and make them come to life via sculpture and dance and projection and all of that. So I'm very excited about that show. I'm also writing a musical about called Show and Tell that's about the apocalypse.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, that's just like, that's my brand. I write musicals where everyone dies at the end. But they're fun. They're uplifting musicals where everyone dies at the end. And I'm going to be back in Boston, in Provincetown and P-Town, in September 10th. I'm doing a little concert for this thing called Afterglow.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Awesome. And finally, a question we ask all of our guests here on Theater Talk. You've been around the theater scene quite a lot. Do you have any fun on-stage mishap stories, or you've seen like a set fall down, or an actor's jumped half the script? Or all your shows perfect?
I have a great one that I cannot tell. I mean, this wasn't a mishap, but this is just like a really fun memory I have. I mean, when I was in tech for The View Upstairs, of course, also I woke up the day before tech. I like fell out of my bed with an excruciating pain, and I had to go to the hospital, and it turned out I had kidney stones. So then for the rest of tech, I was on painkillers.
Oh boy.
Because I was like in so much pain. So I was on like, you know, who even knows what they had me on, Percocet or something, and I was just like kind of out of my mind. And so being in the space, everything kind of took on this like really weird, surreal quality. But yeah, in the original production, we had a chandelier that was like a Sputnik style chandelier, but on every spire of it, we had a different color jelly dildo. So it was like the light up jelly dildo chandelier, and it is very infamous. So you can Google that and it'll definitely show up. But I just remember during tech, one of the jelly dildos fell off the chandelier, and so then our choreographer Al Blackstone was using it to swipe left or right on his Tinder, and I just looked over and I was like high on Percocet, and he was slapping his phone with this dildo when we were in tech, and I was just like, what is my life right now?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Well, Max, I want to thank you so much for coming in to speak with us today. Everyone go see The View Upstairs. It's currently playing through June 22nd over at SpeakEasy Stage Company, and I guess around the world. So if you're not in Boston, it's coming somewhere near you. And also don't forget, Fun Home is also coming back to SpeakEasy June 8th through the 30th. Max, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, and quick plug.
Oh, yeah.
If you want to hear, you can hear the cast album for free. It's on Spotify.
It is on Spotify. I listened all night.
If you want to check out, we have on iTunes, if you get it, there's like a 30-page insert with all of the artwork and lots of essays and lyrics and things that you would only know if you got it there. So,
awesome.
But either way, just go check it out, because I don't make money either way. I just want you to hear the music.
Amazing. Thanks, Max.